Welcome to the Awakened Goddess Show, your source for inspiration, wisdom, and personal discovery. The place to learn from a diverse mix of mentors, metaphysical experts, spiritual leaders, and best-selling authors from around the world. I'm Angela Wilkinson, mindset mentor and founder of the Awakened Goddess Academy. Join me as I explore the minds of my masterful guests while they share powerful insights and easy-to-use tools you can start using right away. Now, let's tap into the energy of the Awakened Goddess and be enlightened by today's guest. Hey, I'm your host, Angela Wilkinson, and welcome to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show. Erin Cox is a business strategist, speaker, and best-selling author, and the mother of 3 young children. Toward the end of her 13-year engineering career, she began to realize she couldn't achieve the work-life balance she craved while working for others. She also knew in her heart that she was meant to inspire others with her writing and speaking. So she made it happen. Erin's first book, One Hot Mama, The Guide to Getting Your Mind and Body Back After Baby, shares powerful messages that ring true for all, that we need to take the utmost care of our physical, mental, and spiritual well-being so we have energy and joy to pursue our passions and live our lives to the fullest. Her mission is to help people create lucrative businesses that support their desired lifestyles and use their unique gifts to make the world a better place. Today, Erin and I talk about her journey to becoming a published Hay House author, how it turned her personal life upside down, and the surrender required from her to get her life back into a place of alignment. But before I talk with Erin, are you ready to ditch dating drama and stop struggling to find love? Join me for the Love Spark program, where you'll learn how to master love from the inside out with the 5 powerful step formula that'll help you meet the one and have your happily ever after. For more information about the program, go to theawakenedgoddess.com/love-spark, and you can sign up there. Now let's talk to Erin. Well, welcome, Erin, to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so glad to be here with you.
You know, it was kind of funny. We're in Mercury retrograde right now, and that usually kind of makes things really exciting when we're talking about technology and communication. And I so appreciate that, I had another guest that was going to talk about surrender with me today, and she had a health emergency. So last minute you jumped on board, and I love it. And I was thinking about this earlier and how perfect for me that this topic is surrender, and I had to really surrender to all this shifting and changing. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Oh, it's fun. Anytime I get a chance to interview with you, I will take it.
Oh, I am blushing. Yeah, so, we connected, how many years ago was this now?
Probably 3.
Yeah, 3. We were in a mastermind group, and we were kind of in this interesting transitional period with our businesses, and you were, I think that was right when you were getting ready to start writing your first book, or had you gotten your contract? What had happened?
I think I was finishing the book and just getting ready for it to launch and sort of trying to grow my business while, really focusing on getting the book out there. Yeah, it was kind of a crazy time. I had a newborn baby.
Yeah, and then I remember you were, because you were getting ready to go on the, what was it, the You Can Do It tour with Hay House? Yes. Okay. All right, so I want to catch listeners up on what's been happening for you. So give us a little backstory. What led up to you getting this contract with Hay House? Because I know that's a really cool story, and then we'll just kind of bring it to current time, and then we're going to just dive in.
So it's kind of a long and crazy story. I'll try to give you the abridged version, I suppose. But I always knew I wanted to be a writer. It was in my heart, one of those deep desires, deep longings. I knew it was what I was meant to do. And about, let's see here, what year would that have been? 2009. I was really moving my way up the ladder as an environmental engineer, consultant. I was doing business development. I was actually enjoying my work on a certain level, but there was definitely this place inside where I craved a little more freedom. I craved more feminine creativity. There was just something kind of not being fulfilled within me. And then about that time, I ended up having a miscarriage, which, in the grand scheme of things, it's a big deal, but it's a common thing that happens to so many women. But for some reason, I'd never really experienced just such deep pain in my life, such emotional pain. And it's really what caused me to start meditating every morning. That was sort of my coping mechanism to deal with the pain. And I remember feeling this expansive feeling in my heart and just this connection with women. And you realize how many women have struggled with things like that. So about that time, I also started writing feverishly. And it just kept coming into my mind, like, you need to write a book. You need to write. So, oh gosh, I was also reading a lot of books by Wayne Dyer at the time. And I remember opening my yoga journal and seeing that he was going to be speaking in Florida, which is where I lived. And I just thought to myself, I really want to go. So I ended up going to that I Can Do It conference in Tampa. At the time, I was pregnant again, thankfully, with my second child. And when I was there, I just kept feeling like these are my people. Like, this is my place. I'd never felt so at home with a crowd. And the crowd just had that, that positive energy. And, when you're in the engineering field, I did always sort of feel like a fish out of water. It just wasn't I enjoyed the work in certain ways, but it never felt like that home. And I remember being in the crowd, and I was only like maybe 15 to 20 weeks pregnant. I can't remember, but just enough where you might not exactly know I'm pregnant. And I remember telling the woman next to me, I might have to get up to use the restroom. And she's like, no, because I told her I was pregnant. And she's like, no problem. So Wayne Dyer does his keynote speech. It was wonderful. It was everything I'd hoped it would be after reading his books. And at the end of it, he said, is anybody in this room expecting a baby or have a new baby? And, of course, I would have never raised my hand, but the woman next to me, grabbed my arm, and she's like, she is. So I went up on stage, and Wayne handed me 2 books that he'd signed, and he said, now make sure you send me a picture of you reading these books to your children. And I said, I promise you I will. So I went home, and, by the time I got around to taking the picture, I had a huge belly. I'm holding my other child, reading this wonderful signed book, which we still have. And I sent him the pictures, and I just sent him a thank you card. And I remember having the most strong desire to say, I can't wait to work with you. Kind of weird at the time, because I didn't even have the seed planted that I could possibly write a book with Hay House. But so when I left that conference, there was an advertisement for a writing workshop, and I was just compelled to grab the flyer. And I took it home, and I just knew I had to go. It was going to be on a Caribbean cruise. And I put it up on my vision board, because that's the kind of girl I am, and I would just walk by it. Every time I was doing laundry, I would sit and stare at it, like, I need to go on that Caribbean cruise. Well, of course, I was about, I went through months. I had my daughter, my second daughter, and the registration was going to close in December, when my daughter would have been about, 6-7 months old. And I remember telling my husband, I really want to go. I just feel like I need to be there. And he's like, we just can't. You've really cut back on your work hours to take care of the baby. We just can't spend money on that. And about literally within a day of the conference registration closing, I got a random check in the mail, and it was from the hospital where my daughter had been born. And somehow we'd overpaid by thousands of dollars. I still, to this day, don't understand how that happened. I called the hospital. I called my insurance. And they said, legitimately, you'd overpaid. It's your money. So I said, I didn't even ask my husband at the time. I was like, I just went and I signed up.
That's right.
And I was like, this is my sign. This is so clear. My mother was like, I want to come too. So she came with me in case I was going to take the baby, which I ended up not taking her. But so I went on this Caribbean cruise. It was magical all the way around. The whole experience was so much fun. It was just amazing. Cheryl Richardson, Wayne Dyer, all these people that I know now were the instructors of the writing workshop. And the whole time I was like a little giddy child, like everything. I couldn't stop reading and learning, and just I took it to the nth degree. And then they also had something called movers and shakers. I can't remember that was sort of in conjunction with the writers' workshops. And that was telling people how to grow their list and do all the things that you need to do as an author. So I went to that, and I was totally lit up. And at the end of the conference, they said, or this event on the cruise ship, they said, one of you will win a contract with Hay House. So we've taught you how to write a book proposal, and you write the book proposal. You have this many months to submit it. So I did that. I wrote the book proposal, and thankfully I was a business development director, with the engineering firm, and that's what I did a lot of, is writing proposals. So it was just easy for me. And I remember that's when I started blogging. That's when I started doing all the things I'd learned about. And I said, yeah, this is what I want to do. It just totally lit me up. And I'll never forget, during that time, I had this young baby. We moved from Florida all the way to Oregon. And literally my birthday that year, 2011, I guess that would have been, I got the keys to my house. I got a call from Reed Tracy telling me I'd won the contract, which is kind of amazing. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those weird premonition moments. I saw this number coming in on my cell phone from 760 area code. I think that's what it was. Whatever it was San Diego. It said San Diego on my cell phone. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's Hay House. I just knew it. And it was. And
did you just jump up and down at that moment? I was like, oh my God.
I was crazy calm and just like, I'm ready. My heart's like, dunk, dunk, dunk. But, he's such a extremely mellow, laid-back guy. If you've heard him talk, he just talks real slow. Mm-hmm. He's so laid back, But we went out that night and celebrated, my husband and I did at the time, and we drank way more wine than we normally do. We took a cab home, and that was the one time that we had unprotected sex. Mm. And 9 months later, my third child was born, which we really weren't planning on having a third child. And so I got, my life just kind of took this massive shift and turn, and things started happening that I couldn't even have conceived of for myself. And, I've attended many parties with Wayne Dyer. I got to tell him the story about, the books and how he loved hearing about that my son was a Hay House celebration baby. Every bit as wonderful in person, and I've gotten to have so many experiences. I got to speak on a stage to 3,000 people at the I Can Do It event or more. I really don't know how many people were there. A lot of people in San Jose. And, I got to be on the morning shows in New York and do things that were so wonderful. And then the wheels started coming off. My now ex-husband, there were things that were hard that came along with it, especially for a guy who, he's a fighter pilot. I don't want to put him down, but, it was hard for him to not be the center of everything. And so many things started just happening that now I see were really important and will be for my benefit in the future. But the last year and a half have been a little bit on the hellish side of the spectrum. So it's kind of funny to have two of the very most amazing, magical, dreamy years of your life followed by some of the very, very most heartbreakingly painful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's why I thought you would be an amazing person to talk to about surrender. Because when you have something like that that happens, you really have to surrender, right? But you don't want to do it. You just go kicking and screaming because it's like things happen that are out of your control. And, we can resist or we can embrace. So let's talk about this, and I want to kind of see where this conversation goes.
Well, it's funny because when I kind of started figuring out that my life was falling apart, I realized my husband was having an affair. And he probably had multiple affairs. I don't know that for sure, but I suspect very, very strongly. And for a while, I was in such denial that I was functioning just as highly. I was still running my mastermind group. I was still out there doing speaking engagements. I was still moving forward, sort of in denial. And even when, we realized, this was it was not going to work. My ex-husband moved out. I was on my own raising at this time. My son was not even one. He was barely one. And, when it's all started to sink in, I kept trying to push myself to keep going and doing and, maintaining the schedule. And at some point, I just realized I couldn't. I was feeling emotions I'd never felt before. I was feeling obviously depressed, looking in retrospect, which I've never struggled with depression. And just the demands of caring for my 3 very young kids consumed me, and I couldn't do much else. And then I started feeling like a failure. I kind of checked out of doing anything for my online business, my presence as an author. I stopped writing for a while, except for to try to understand what I was going through. And at some point, like in my morning prayer, I've always been, it's a 2-way conversation with me and God, or my divine support system. And I just knew I had to surrender and just, like, this is my big life lesson. Like, you have got to let go. You cannot make this any different. You just have to let this move through you, and you have to let it run its course. If you keep fighting this, you're not going to heal. You're not going to get back to that place where you want to go. And I started believing it. And so I remember sending this email out to my list saying, I don't know, I'm going through some really difficult, painful times. I don't know how often I'm going to write. And I had this huge fear of just losing all importance in the world. Mm-hmm. And, the fact of the matter is, when you're not putting stuff out all the time, you're not doing the speaking engagements, you're not constantly putting energy into your business, it just stays where it is. And that really bothered me because things had been growing like a rocket ship. And then I had to accept flatness. And I'm a very ambitious person. That was so hard for me. But I saw how much my children needed me. They needed me to just be there to love them. And I didn't have anything left over beyond that. So that's what I did.
Yeah. So let me ask you, when you found out that your husband was having an affair, what was your internal process about how you received that news? I mean, because I would imagine that you would have an internal conflict between, do I leave him? Do I stay? But what was that?
That was the hardest part. That was like, when I look back, that in between, like deciding what to do was really hard. I think way deep down, I knew what the answer was. He and I are such different people. He struggles with a lot of things, and I have to be very careful what I say publicly.
Yes.
Last time I wrote anything about him specifically, he deleted my entire website and all my online classes. Tens of, thousands of dollars worth of stuff he just deleted. So, mission accomplished. He scared me into not speaking about him. But yeah, I kept struggling because my parents have such an amazing marriage, and I didn't, in my idealistic mind, I'm like, nobody in my family's ever been divorced, which of course, if I think about it, that's not exactly true. And I also really thought a lot about my children. And so it was a big process of acceptance. And I, in my mind, sort of created a checklist of things he was going to have to do to even make me consider, like, okay, well, we're going to go counseling for this many months, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And when he wasn't willing to do any of it, it was like, okay. So he almost made it easy for me to make that decision, although it was still gut-wrenching, because I think the thing that I struggled with the most was for my children, that they weren't going to have that idealistic version of a 2-parent household that I'd grown up with, and that I never thought I wouldn't be able to create for them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a tough decision until it wasn't, and I knew here's kind of a funny story. I was actually going to an author. I'm in a mastermind with a couple of other authors, and we were going to be meeting at my friend's house, who lives in, actually my mom's friend's ranch in Paso Robles, California. And I hadn't really told anybody anything yet. And I remember praying, God, please give me a sign of what I should do. I don't know what to do about staying married, whatever, moving on. As I drove from Oregon down to California, in the drive time, I didn't even feel comfortable leaving my wedding ring at my house because I knew he would take it. So I had it on my finger, and in that, it's kind of a long drive, 8 or 9 hours, my finger had gotten so swollen, inflamed, like a bloody rash. I mean, it looked like somebody put arsenic on my finger.
Oh my. That's a big sign.
Just a little bit of a sign. And then at that weekend, that special, like this magical weekend, one of the women I was with does tarot cards, and she's just a really mystical, magical person. And everybody, she'd been doing them for all the other women, and their cards were really beautiful. Like, oh, you might have a little challenge here, but oh, this is when you're going to have this launch, and when they were all so good. Then she did mine, and she gets to these cards. I don't do tarot myself, so I can't even remember what they were, but it was like death, destruction, like big bad things are happening. She's like, and then you're going to go through this time of nothingness. And it's going to be a long time. And when that card was pulled, like this nothingness, it just like that one chilled me. I kind of knew the death destruction one was coming, but that nothingness, I was like, what does that mean? And that,
especially for a higher achiever.
So that nothingness is really where I've been in the past few years. And, you know, when I feel when I'm trying to rebel against it, it's definitely my ego telling me, you should be doing more. You should be growing your list. You should be doing this. But there is this calm center within me that's like, you know, you're doing what you have to right now, and it's okay. And I sometimes have to remind myself of that every single morning.
Yeah. So just for clarification, how would you describe surrender? Because, you know, we're not talking about the just giving up kind of surrender, but how would you describe it?
So I think the biggest feelings of anger and resentment and frustration come when we are resisting what is. And for me, resisting that, I didn't have the energy, literally my mind just could not be creative. I couldn't accept it. And the more I couldn't accept it and just, you know, I resisted that and was angry at myself, disgusted with myself. Like, why can't you do better? Why can't you just get up at 5 a.m. and write for 2 hours? Why can't, you know, and at some point, and actually over and over, it's just surrendering is, you know what? It is what it is, and I have to fully accept it. I can't resist it any longer. I was too tired to resist it any longer. And like I said, you know, being a mother is to me the most important thing that I'm doing in my life right now. And I had to surrender to their needs, supporting them through this whole transition because, you know, their dad moved out. I can't even imagine for especially my oldest child. And my 2 little ones, he's an Air Force pilot. He was gone all the time. Really just a bump on the road. I mean, I'm not going to say it was a bump on the road, but the transition wasn't very huge. My son was just a baby. Mm-hmm. But my oldest child was, you know, she's a daddy's girl. It was really hard in managing that. So surrendering just meant saying, you know what, it is what it is. I cannot change it. You know, and then you also go through those things when you've gone through a divorce. Like, what could I have done better? What could I have done differently? You know, why did he stray? And was it me? Was I? And you get to a point where you're like, there's nothing I could have done. This is his journey. It was his choice. It's his insecurities. And, of course I could have done better, but you just can't play that game either. You just have to surrender and accept it. It is what it is. And I think that is what allowed me to let go of so much anger. I have never experienced anger. I'm not an angry person. I don't really yell. I don't get angry. And I experienced at my ex-husband, like a form of rage that is like, that could eat your soul. I mean, it could make you sick. And I remember feeling like for the first time in my life, around my neck and my shoulders, I was feeling like what I would almost consider chronic body pain, just because I was filled with rage. So mad at him for ruining this idealistic picture that I had for my life. And, but that's exactly what it was. You know, he was struggling for a long time and I didn't want to face it. And I'm sure I made him feel isolated because I didn't want to face the fact that he was struggling, and because I couldn't relate. And that was, you know, my fault looking in retrospect. But yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah. Well, and so looking back, it appeared, you know, things were all in alignment, right? So you went to the event in Florida with Hay House, and then you got this message that you were to go to the cruise, and then on the cruise you were completely lit up, and you wrote this proposal, and you were just kind of on fire. Things were kind of speeding up, momentum was picking up, things were going well, and it all seemed like things were in alignment. But then something happened. So what do you attribute that to? Do you think that was there something about up-leveling, or was it that you just had grown apart with your husband, or where do you see like the alignment piece in there?
Well, alignment is such a powerful word for me. It's actually in the title of my next book. I think that he was definitely intended to be the father of my children. He is not the ideal partner for me for the next phase of my life. I think deep-seated insecurities make it so that for him, he just wasn't the right partner for the next phase. He has a lot of good traits. I don't want to be throwing him under the bus. But yeah, he just isn't the right partner for the next phase. And I actually think because I was so aligned that it fell apart because he was not he just really wasn't a part of that next phase. And I think God knew that for me, I'm a fighter I would have been a fighter for my marriage. If I hadn't had something that is so like in my face, like you cannot ignore this, I would have probably stayed with him forever. So everything that happened was just enough for me to know with certainty that we couldn't stay together, but it wasn't so in my face that it like permanently scarred me. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like I didn't walk in on him naked with another woman, which I think could be permanently, right. I saw enough. I saw what I saw, but I didn't have to see. So I actually think, as I move through this, I wouldn't be the person I am today if I hadn't gone through that struggling. All these really, really horrendously, painfully hard times are a part of shaping us into being who we are meant to be. So who am I to say that I'm not supposed to be going through a time of suffering? It's been hard. It's been gut-wrenching. But on the other hand, it's shown me that I have a tribe of women and people that love me so much and support me. And, relationships have deepened. I've realized that I've got the most incredible family that a woman could have. My parents have just stepped in as these, they live in South Dakota, but they're here all the time. They're just so here for me. And, I look forward to having, I met my husband when I was 25 years old. He's extremely good looking. He's tall, dark, handsome, fighter pilot, smart. He seemed like the ideal man. But as I've really grown into who I am, there was just this connection we didn't have that I really am starting to get excited about having with a partner, a deeper, more spiritual connection. And that's just not his thing. We would have never had that. I don't think. I always hoped we would. I kept on hoping and praying he would become that man with me, but he can't. And I think for him, that probably felt like a lot of pressure too. Like he knew what I was craving. He knew what this deep thing that I was wanting, and that didn't work for him. So everything is divinely inspired. But now, so for my next book, which is called The Year of Realignment, I'm realizing how being married to a man who is extremely critical and not spiritual. I slowly drifted away from my center to try to please him and make things work with him. And even in the way, the way I run my household, I became a little more conventional than I really am. So, I'm slowly realigning my life. I had a shaman at my house. We've done like 4 energy clearing, space clearing rituals here now. Like that kind of thing I wouldn't have done with him because it would have been too weird for him, too out there, too woo-woo. And it's just this beautiful thing of being able to sort of reclaim all these little lost parts of myself and realign to this person that I know God intended for me to be. And I see that all of us go through life with this perfectly aligned version of who we could be. And you you have to keep coming back to that center. But these really hard life events, you can either go way off or you can work really hard and get more aligned than you've ever been. And so that's really what I'm trying to do in all areas of my life. I'm trying all these different interesting healing modalities that I would have, never had an opportunity. So, yeah.
Well, and how perfect, going back to the divinely planned or mapped out or whatever, that, you were writing your second book. What initially started out as something different, and now it's like this has been a catalyst to change it and transform it to be probably a much deeper, richer, more helpful book for people.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is, people are messaging me all the time out of the blue, like, I think I'm going to be going through the same thing that you are. How do I do this? How do I do this without just losing my mind? Because trust me, there were days where I was like, I was so grateful to have my kids, because I had to keep myself at least, pretty darn pulled together. And a lot of choices I've had to make to support my family. I loved doing just my writing and my speaking full time for myself. I worked about 10 to 20 hours a week max. Mm-hmm. It was awesome. And now, I'm a professor at the local university, and I'm doing some other, I got a 3-year contract to work with the Blue Zones Project, which is, awesome opportunities, but it's, making it more difficult for me to do those things. But those are the things I need to do to support my children and stay in our beautiful home. And so again, I have to surrender to it, that everything's going to happen more slowly. And I also am surrendering to the fact that I need to hire people to help me out so I can keep the things moving forward. And I've always just had, here and there, I've always had 2 virtual assistants just sort of doing little things, but I need something more solid. And life is just so interesting. And you're right, the book comes from a much deeper place. You can't really write about realigning if you haven't been thrown so far out of alignment that, it wouldn't be a very interesting story. It's going to be a much more interesting story, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Well, okay, so when we're thrown challenges, because it's easy to be in alignment when everything's going smoothly and life's moving along fantastically. But when life throws you something like a monkey wrench, how do you find that alignment?
Oh, it really starts with taking it back to the basics. And I think that's sometimes what God's pushing us to do is just take care of your physical body and your soul, and kind of cut out the unnecessary things for a while. For me, when I was in the worst of it, I just had to focus on literally getting sleep, taking hot baths, having wine with my girlfriends, getting massages. Really, like, when your soul is just ripped apart, you have to just take care of really simple, basic things.
It's like quieting at least for me, I have to quiet everything outside of myself in some way, whether that's meditation or really kind of letting go of anything that just doesn't feel right anymore.
And just really tuning in with your feeling, when you find yourself feeling that strong resistance to things that normally make you feel really excited or happy, like, it's time to just bear it down to the most simple things and just take care of yourself, and making sure that you're taking time to have the quiet and the meditation to understand what your soul's really yearning for. For a while, I just kept myself as busy as I possibly could so I didn't have to feel anything.
Yeah.
And that's obviously a common technique. Instead of having quiet time, like, I was in so much pain, I couldn't face it quite yet. So I've never had a TV in my room, but my dad brought me a TV that he'd won at some raffle. I parked a TV in my room, and I watched a show called Heart of Dixie in Obsession. So I didn't just have to be quiet and really feel how much this was hurting. And I think that's okay too. But at some point, you cannot do that forever. Yeah. When you're strong enough, you start facing it in little bits and kind of chomping through it and dealing with the rage and the anger and just whatever you're feeling. You have to really feel it. You cannot stuff it. I think I remember my friend telling me, you have to feel it. You have to go through all of it. Otherwise, it's going to be like you're stuffing down a geyser, and it's going to burst out at the most inopportune time. Yeah. And then she told me about a story of how that happened in her life. She had a rough childhood. She'd stuffed all this pain and emotion, and at some point in her 20s, she realized she was doing things, it was like the geyser was, like, she couldn't stuff it in anymore. And I heard that visual of a geyser, like, you're right, it's got to come out. It's got to be gone through at some point, you might as well.
That's when you find yourself like driving down the road and you're all of a sudden in road rage. And it's like, oh my God, where'd that come from?
Yep. And it's so true. Or, I'm sitting at the grocery store and there was a song by Christina Aguilera. And I cannot remember what it was at the time, but it just triggered.
Genie in a bottle.
No, not a good one. No, what's the? No. Like it's like this really sad song about like I'm giving up on you. I'm giving up on you.
Yeah.
And I remember I was giving up on my ex-husband at the time, and if I heard that song, no matter where I was, I would sob. Like,
yeah.
And I remember hearing it at the grocery store, and it like just triggered this feeling in me, like I had to let out some sadness apparently. So I'm like, well, maybe if I just listen to this song at home all the time, I'll get it all out so I can.
Yeah. Yeah, you just you cope how you can, and you choose the best self-care that you can, and I think the biggest and toughest piece is not resisting.
You do, and I still find myself doing it. Like I was telling you before we started recording, I have all these women that I mentored, that were my, I was helping them, and now I see that their business is exploding and they're doing such wonderful things. And I've just sort of pushed the pause button on my business. And I thought that's when I start resisting,
Mm-hmm.
I need to be doing more. I need to be pushing. I need to do this. And it still just doesn't feel right. So then I have to just accept it and say, it's okay. It will happen when it's meant to happen. It will happen as easily as it did before, or easier. The magic will happen when I am aligned. And, the more I push, it may get me nowhere with a lot of angst. So I just think checking in every day, is it time? And I do know it's time to start writing the book again. That is definitely one thing. And then I do need to start re-engaging. I'm feeling that on a small level, though, like kind of easing back into it rather than going back to the exact place where I kind of dropped off. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the hard thing. I'm expecting to be just right where, everything was, but I'm going to have to ease back into it and build back up. That's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm. But like you say, it's like when you surrender and when you are in alignment, things can happen very quickly. But it is
very quickly.
Yeah, but it's that letting go, surrendering, and getting in alignment first. Not struggling and pushing and trying and doing all the shoulding and forcing and
struggling, pushing. If you feel like you're fighting this uphill battle, if you feel like you're putting so much work into things without the right results, just really take some time to yourself and realize what's out of alignment here. Because when you are aligned, I'm not going to say it's easy, but things just start to flow. You're in the flow. There's just not that weird, funny internal resistance or energetic resistance. And the more of a sensitive, spiritually based kind of person you are, the more you feel that tug of like something's just not right here. And pay attention to those things, because it's your body, which is so wise. It's your spirit guide saying, hey, check in here.
Yeah. Yep. So to wrap up, I'm wondering if you have some like a really practical tip to share with the listeners.
I just think the most useful tip is obviously the practice of self-love, self-care, and really letting things go. But, when I was saying how when I had lost that baby a long time ago, when I started my morning meditation practice, I think being able to check in to see if you're feeling those funny feelings of discontent or whatever that uncomfortable thing is for you, finding a way, and for everybody it's different. For some people it's running, for some people it's yoga, meditation, finding a way that you check in with yourself to kind of do some discovery and figure out what it is. And if you need to surrender and let things go and just take like that tarot card, have some nothingness time, that's completely okay. I think we are, when we're ambitious kind of people, very productive. I think that just releasing and having nothingness time is really uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It's uncomfortable until it isn't. And then you're like, oh, this is where I need to be. And you heal. That's where you heal. And then to get in realignment, again, you just have to take enough time to yourself to feel everything. And you cannot be in alignment if you are so stressed out and so busy and so, frazzled all over the place. Like, alignment really comes with getting clear about who you are, how you want to live your life, how you want to show up in the world, and then creating a life that allows you to do so.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I can't wait to read your book when it comes out.
I can't wait either. I have to tell you, when I wrote my first book, when I've written anything, I remember I've never really read the whole thing from cover to cover, but I remember getting the galley from Hay House and looking through it and being like, did I write this? I don't know. I guess I did.
Yeah, who wrote this? Wow.
Who wrote this? So it's kind of it's like a channeled thing. So when it actually comes out, you're like, oh, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, you're like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
So I can't wait to read it too.
Awesome. Well, I understand you have a really cool gift for the listeners. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so some time ago, I just felt like I'm the person that every once in a while I like to just sort of reinvigorate myself. And I wrote something called the Inspired Life Kickstart Plan. All it is just something to think about every single day for a week. There's a little practice, things you can do around your house. There's a recipe for every day, some of my favorite recipes still to this day. And so if you are in a place where you're just looking to sort of kickstart your inspired life, realign yourself, get that process started. It really does start with the basics. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that is a free gift I would love to share with your beautiful tribe.
Nice. Well, thank you. Well, this was such a real and transparent and authentic, juicy conversation. So I thank you so much for being so transparent and vulnerable.
Even just talking about it with you, it's part of the healing. Like, every time you share the story, it loses a little bit of its sting. It just becomes more factual. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was really enjoyable.
I'm glad you enjoyed. So, and now for you, my gorgeous goddess. Was there something Erin or I shared that resonated with you? If so, we'd love to hear about it. Head on over to today's show page at theawakenedgoddess.com and leave us a comment. Did you enjoy this episode? If so, subscribe to the show on iTunes and please share it with all of your friends. And if you want even more incredible resources, join the Awakened Goddess community to get Erin's gift and bonus content from the show. Until next time, goodbye everyone! Thank you for listening to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show. I hope you enjoyed today's guest and got something you can start using in your life right away. For more spiritual insights and to listen to more episodes, subscribe to The Awakened Goddess Show at theawakenedgoddess.com and discover wisdom that'll change your life.